everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, which is aimed at endpoint assessment. We'll be covering all the standards we provide EPA for, along with allowing time for us to answer any questions you may have. So let's do the housekeeping and view the agenda. My name's Emilia Woodward, and I'm the Technical Advisor for Hospitality and Catering. I'm here today with my colleague Jason Ben, who I'm sure will introduce himself.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar.
Oh, excellent. A picture of Jason as well. We're also joined by one of the EPA partnership managers, Janice Collins.
Morning, everybody.
Janice will be giving you an update on EPA Pro and will also be around to answer any specific questions on EPA Pro for you. Janice and Jason, can you put yourselves on mute? I think I'm getting some feedback. Thank you. So for now, you're all muted. Do type your questions into the question box, but if you'd specifically like to be unmuted and ask your question, please just type into the box you'd like to ask a question, and when we get to the question and answer sections, we'll unmute you. If you have any technical issues or need some help, please raise your hand and Jason or myself will help you. This is being recorded and you will receive a copy of it as you've registered to attend. Okay, so on to the agenda. We'll be covering the current dispensations, then a brief update from People First. We'll then move on to the new standards and assessment plans for Commis and Chef de Partie, as these are now live. We'll stop for questions at this point. Janice will then give an EPA Pro update and be available to answer any generic questions. We'll then move on to a session where I'll be giving you some points of good practice and reminders about evidence required for EPA and how to submit it. And lastly, a further question and answer session to mop up any yet unanswered questions. And as always, if we don't get round to answering all the questions, then we will get back to you individually. The hospitality dispensations will remain in place until the 31st of December this year. After this time, they will be removed and only face-to-face endpoint assessment will be allowed. At this time, it is still necessary for you to advise us if you want face-to-face EPA to take place. Don't forget you can also use a hybrid model of, for example, culinary challenge being face-to-face and using either of the dispensations, so competency framework or witness testimony, for the practical observation. The link on the page takes you directly to our communications about the dispensations. Following many months of waiting, the new standards and assessment plans for Chef de Partie and Commis are now live on the Institute's web pages. The link on this page will take you straight there. I'll talk more about these changes in a while, but essentially, anyone who you now sign up will be subject to the new standards and assessment plan. These are still a 12-month standard, so clearly EPA will not be required for another year. So in the meantime, we will work on getting support resources available for you, and I will be delivering more specific webinars and updates and providing voiced over presentations on the exact full assessment requirements for EPA. The team member standard has now also been fully reviewed. The food production pathway has been removed, but all others currently remain available. The standard and assessment plan will be submitted to the Institute by People First in November. So it's likely that this standard, if approved, will be live in January, February 2022. The proposal still is that the business project is removed and the three assessment methods are an evolved test, a practical observation and a professional discussion. Hospitality supervisor is yet to be reviewed. This was put on hold due to COVID and nothing has yet taken place. The patisserie confectionery level 3 standard is still in development and will be a pathway type route as team member with core components and then options depending upon job role. It is being developed in conjunction with the Bakery Trailblazer. As you're aware, all EQA provision will move to Ofqual, and our standards are no different. There will be a transition period in 2022, with the full service of EQA being handed over to Ofqual from People First in September 2022. It is expected that People First will remain involved from a consultancy basis, but we have no further information on this. Okay, so now let's talk about the changes. So let's start by talking about Commis Chef first. This is still a 12-month standard with an EPA period of approximately 4 months. Overall grade will be fail, pass and distinction. The immediate changes you can see are in the number of assessment methods. So these have been reduced from 4 to 3, with the practical observation being removed and the culinary challenge amended into a practical assessment with questions. Apprentices will still have to have achieved a level 1 functional skill and have taken a level 2 test. The assessment methods can be delivered in any order, so no longer a need to leave the professional discussion to the end, as none of the assessments rely on each other in any way. The other huge difference is the removal of the recipe log and the inclusion of a portfolio of evidence which will underpin the professional discussion. So let's look in a little more detail at each assessment method. The knowledge test will be sat via Evolve and will be 50 multiple choice questions with a 75-minute time frame. The practical assessment is graded fail, pass or distinction and will be a 3-hour observation set by the Endpoint Assessment Organisation. We, the Endpoint Assessment Organisation, will be required to compile a number of scenarios tasks for the endpoint assessors to issue randomly to apprentices. These will be pre-written and standardised, but will need to cover 3 prep, 3 cook and 3 finish methods of a 2-course meal with a main and either a starter or dessert. The brief will also cover a specific requirement, e.g. an intolerance or religious belief, for the apprentice to consider and plan the meal. The environment can be simulated but needs to closely replicate an RWE, so college environment will be acceptable, as will an employer's premises. No breaks will be allowed during the practical observation, and we will only be possible for an endpoint assessor to assess 4 apprentices at any one time. The observation will then be followed by a question and answer session. In total, the observation plus questions is 3 hours. An increase of 10% can occur at the individual endpoint assessor's discretion. A minimum of 6 questions may be asked during the question and answer session. And lastly, the professional discussion is again fail, pass or distinction and will last 60 minutes with a minimum of 12 questions asked. I'll talk about the portfolio of evidence required in a little bit more detail later after we've looked at Chef de Partie. Again, this is a 12-month standard with the EPA period being approximately 4 months. It is, however, advised by People First that 18 months are spent on this standard before Gateway. The overall grade will be fail, pass or distinction, and apprentices must achieve English and Maths at level 2. Assessment methods can be delivered in any order, as no one again relies on the other. And again, the change here is a reduction from 4 assessments to 3, with the culinary challenge being removed and the practical observation being adjusted to a question and answer session as well. So the knowledge test will still be completed via Evolve with 50 questions and an allowance of 75 minutes to complete them in. The observation must be completed in the workplace within the environment where the apprentice usually works. No simulation is allowed. It is expected that the apprentice will be preparing, cooking and finishing complex dishes. This will last 3.5 hours, though the independent endpoint assessor has a 10% discretion to increase this time should it allow for assessment to be completed. Only one apprentice can be assessed at any one time. A minimum of 8 questions must be asked, with a fixed time of 30 minutes allowed at the end, and this is part of the 3.5 hours, so it could be 3 hours for the observation and 30 minutes for questioning. Finally, the professional discussion includes the discussion around the portfolio of evidence. It is 90 minutes long and will have a minimum of 12 questions. Again, a 10% discretion can be applied. The questions will focus on industry and food trends, problem solving, promotion of business and growth, customers, advanced prep and cook and finish techniques, or a variety of basic techniques combined to create a more complex dish. Okay, so let's talk about the portfolio of evidence. So this is the bit that replaces the recipe logs. So I'm sure many of you will be really pleased that those recipe logs will no longer be required. The portfolio of evidence relates to both Commis chef and Chef de Partie, and the only difference would be in the actual criteria to be assessed and the complexity of any dishes submitted as evidence. So let's look in a little more detail at the requirements of the portfolio of evidence. This is required to cover the knowledge, skills and behaviours which are to be assessed as part of the professional discussion. So not all evidence held within will be recipe based. There are no food groups to meet. It is expected that around 20 pieces of discrete evidence will be submitted. All of these need to be mapped to the knowledge, skills and behaviours. An onus is put on qualitative evidence rather than quantitative. It is preferred that one piece of evidence meets more than one knowledge, skill or behaviour. Evidence sources can come from annotated photographs of the apprentice's work, workplace policies and procedures, employer written witness testimonies of direct observation of practice. However, no reflective accounts or self-reflection from the apprentice are allowed within the portfolio. Accompanying the portfolio, there will need to be a declaration of authenticity. The portfolio will not be assessed by us or any feedback given by us on its content, but as it will be used to make a judgment on the grading of the professional discussion, it may well impact on the apprentice's ability to pass or gain a distinction if it is not suitable or does not meet this criteria. Okay, so let's pause here for some questions. Do we have any questions, Jason?
We do. We've got one from Sarah. Thank you, Sarah. What date does the new EPA apply from? If we have apprentices that are already on programme due to finish in the spring, will they be on the old EPA or the new?
So if they're already signed up, then you carry on the sort of current standard that you signed them up for. So it's only for new apprentices. That's a very, very good question, Sarah, because the actual date, it doesn't, I'm assuming the actual date is on the Institute website, but what I will do is I'll make sure I get that actual date for you so that you can, you'll sort of have that, and I'll email that out to everybody that's attended today so that you have that date. I've got the actual assessment plan in front of me, but it doesn't have a specific date on it. I'm pretty sure it's the end of sort of September, but I will check that for you.
Thanks, Emilia. And Emma's got a question. Please, could you explain a little bit more on how they are mapped to KSB? I am unsure about this.
So I'm assuming you mean each individual piece of evidence. So if you sort of go to the Institute website and you download the assessment pack, then you'll be able to see exactly what assessment method is covered within each of the knowledge, skills and behaviours. So, for example, in the knowledge, the first knowledge statement, K1, is how industry food trends, customer preferences, seasonality, provenance and global environmental factors influence the development of dishes and menus. And the assessment method for that is the professional discussion. This is for the Chef de Partie standard I'm actually currently looking at. So what you would do is ensure that you had a piece of evidence that would cover that, if at all possible. So anything that the apprentice might have done to show that, places they'd visited, perhaps menus that they'd created, etc. Anything that they'd sort of done, perhaps, been asked to do by the business. If you've got anything that would prove that, then you would literally put that piece of evidence into the portfolio and then reference that as it's sort of meeting K1. Now, what you would then do is obviously clearly try to check through then the rest of the knowledge, skills and behaviours to see whether that would also cover other component parts. So really the idea is that you're adding in pieces of evidence, but that they are of a quality that will allow more than one of the knowledge, skills or behaviours to be met. Now, with the portfolio of evidence, you're actually submitting that at the point of gateway. So whilst we're not assessing it, we will have access to it. So we will use that to then write the professional discussion questions. So anything that's not there or we don't feel is substantial enough to meet one of the knowledge, skills or behaviours, then we would be asking the apprentice a question on. So that's how the professional discussion will work. I hope that answers that question, Emma.
And I think that's also answered another question from Emma about whether the evidence needs to cover every food group and so many prep and cook methods. So thank you for that. Heidi's confirmed the date was the 28th of September. That's correct. Thank you, Heidi. Good to see you.
Thank you, Heidi.
I should be ticking these off as I see them, and I haven't been. David's asked, you might bounce this back to me, Emilia, when will the new assessment packs be ready for us lecturers to use and view?
I won't bounce it back to you, Jason. I'll answer it. So literally the standards of, you get the standard at exactly the same time as we do. We got a draft version, but until it actually hits the Institute website, then it's not done and dusted. So we actually can't submit it internally for us to start all the work on the EPA packs, assessment packs, etc. until that point. So we are literally submitting it internally in a couple of weeks' time, after which point we'll be able to start work on it. But I mean, essentially any questions that you've got, David, you can just, sort of come and ask. Obviously, what we will be doing is sort of bottoming out everything and putting together full assessment packs. But I mean, I have to say, the assessment, our assessment plans, they're pretty well written. All of the information that I'm giving you here today, I've literally gleaned from the standards and the assessment plans. As endpoint assessment organisations now, we don't have anything additional. It used to be that we used to have an additional document as well, but we don't. We literally get access to exactly what you get. So really all that we'll be giving you is sort of things similar to what you have now. So in sort of shorter or smaller bite-sized pieces, each of the assessment methods, etc., and sort of making sure we explain them and how they're going to be assessed by us, etc. All of the other background work will be based around what we need to do in terms of standardising questions, because we have to produce standardised question banks, and these observations that I talked about for Commis Chef these sort of religious beliefs, intolerances, allergies, etc., we'll have to come up with sort of a number of standardised sort of scenarios that, you know, independent endpoint assessors will then issue randomly to apprentices. So that's all the background work that we'll do. You won't actually have access to those until the point that the apprentices get issued to them. But obviously we'll be able to give you some a bit more detail on how that's going to look and feel, and hopefully provide you with sample ones, etc., as well as, you know, sample mock tests, which is exactly what we did before. Hopefully that helps. As soon as is the answer.
Thank you very much. Emma's asked a good question. Does all the evidence have to be recipes, or could it be from menu planning, etc.?
No, and it's not expected that it will be recipes, Emma, because when you actually look at the knowledge, skills and behaviours for the professional discussion, that one that I read out to you previously couldn't be covered by a recipe at all. So you've got things like, I'm just looking at the Commis chef assessment plan now, and one of the skills is the use of technology for the development and production of dishes and menu items in line with business procedures and guidelines to achieve the best results. And the assessment method for that particular skill, it's expected that that will be the professional discussion. So again, you could provide, or the apprentice could provide, a piece of evidence to prove that. So you're kind of back to the old, I daren't say it, but I'm going to, the NVQ portfolio, where you're actually sort of proving the criteria through the piece of evidence. So that's what we're looking for. Typically 20 pieces that are really good quality pieces that will cover as many of those knowledge, skills and behaviours as possible. So definitely download yourself the standards in the assessment pack and then have a look. You know, you'll be able to go through, it literally lays out towards the end of the assessment plan all the knowledge, skills and behaviours, and you'll be able to then sort of highlight for yourself exactly which need to be covered by the professional discussion, and indeed underpinned by the portfolio of evidence. But we'll definitely be providing more support for that. You know, that's something that we'll absolutely be doing.
Thank you. Karen's asked if the current learner manual will be any use for evidence.
Oh, that's a good question. It might be, for sure it might be. And that's something that we haven't carried out any sort of mapping process currently, Karen. And I'm not sure, you know, if that's something people are interested in, then I'm sure that's something we can look at. But at this point in time, we certainly haven't done that. Now, what's obviously happened is some of the knowledge, skills and behaviours have definitely changed, been tweaked, etc. And not massively, but definitely some of them have. But because we've gone from 4 assessment methods to 3, what we've sort of done is it tends to be that there's more been added into the evolved test and more added into the professional discussion and portfolio of evidence. So it may well be that there are things that could be used in the portfolio of evidence from the apprenticeship training manual. So again, that's something that we could look at in terms of providing support for you.
And David's asked if there'll be new question banks written as a result of the changes.
Yes, absolutely, because, you know, the topics have changed in some cases, so definitely we'll be having to sort of redevelop those to make sure that they're still, you know, no doubt there will be some questions that will be sort of used that are still current, but yes, they'll be completely sort of redone, and, you know, you'll obviously get new mock tests as well, so that you can see what that looks like, and there'll be a new handbook produced which has all the criteria in there that you need to teach for the tests then to be sort of achieved by the apprentices.
Perfect, thank you. That's us up to date with questions, Emilia. So
brilliant, fantastic. Okay, but if anyone's got any more questions that they want to ask that relate to that, then obviously feel free, keep typing them in, and we'll have some more time for questions and answers sort of at the end. But for now, I'm going to hand over to Janice.
Thanks very much, Emilia. So my name is Janice Collins. I'm one of the Endpoint Assessment Partnership Managers here at City and Guilds, and I'm really ready to support our centres with the generic support across endpoint assessment across all standards, and help you with the process sort of side of the endpoint assessment, as Emilia and Jason are the sector specialists for hospitality. So first of all, I just wanted to reiterate and go through the SLA agreements for the standards, and to take you through those just as a refresh in case anyone's got any questions, because I appreciate there's been quite a few changes to our processes over the last few months with the introduction of EPA Pro. So really, obviously the first step is the learner's registered onto the system, and you can do that at any point during the learner's journey. Obviously, the earlier you do it, the better in terms of the accessibility of learners to have EPA Pro and access to resources themselves. And it also helps ourselves in terms of the operational team, knowing how many learners we've got coming through at any one given time, so we can obviously plan and make sure we've got the right level of IEPAs for customer needs. Once the learner is on the system and you're ready to submit the gateway, you'd upload your gateway evidence into the system and click the submit button, at which our gateway team will then check the gateway information within 3 working days and come back to you via the system to let you know whether it's been accepted or rejected. You may also have the communications coming through via email, and that's entirely up to you as a centre whether you use the communication settings in EPA Pro to get those notifications. Once we've got that learner through the gateway, on hospitality standards we still have the gateway meetings, so the learner will be assigned to an IEPA, and then we'll plan that planning meeting with the IEPA, and that's the date that you put into the system would be anything from 10 days from the date you're submitting the gateway. So hopefully, very quickly by 7 days, 8 days, we've got that meeting planned, and you'll have that meeting with the IEPA to plan the different elements of the endpoint assessment. As it is currently, obviously you'll plan them. Obviously, if the learner does fail one element, you may have to resit and may need to reschedule some of the other dates for the other assessment components. But obviously, moving forward, that wouldn't be an issue under the new assessment plan. Obviously, we aim to have those assessments within 3 to 4 weeks, but that does depend on obviously the learner availability and the IEPA availability once you're at that planning meeting. But once those assessments have taken place, our results will be in EPA Pro within 7 working days of each component, and then the overall result will be 7 working days after the last component has been sat. At the same time as we'll do the certification, the statement of results for the learner in EPA Pro is available to download from the learner's profile section, either by yourself or by the learner if they've got access to the system. And then we will, the following week, so generally 5 days after the learner's been certified in the system, we'll then apply for the ESFA certificate, and that will go to the address that you've put in the workplace details of the learner in EPA Pro. And then we'll also send the learner to the email address that they have put in EPA Pro, additional credential for them to share, obviously, their endpoint assessment results on social media. Next slide, please, Emilia. Okay, apologies, this seems to have overlapped on saving, but this is obviously, I just wanted to highlight a little bit of a change in the uploading of the gateway evidence for the planning meeting. So basically, you used to upload a planning meeting form, and for those of you that haven't done a recent gateway with a learner, we've now got those questions are within EPA Pro. So you don't need to upload any longer the planning meeting form, but you'll see this section 4 is now questions, so that you'll upload into the questions the details, so no longer do you need to put that in. Next slide, please, Emilia. And this just makes it a little bit clearer. So don't know, apologies that the typed over the types on each other. So then obviously you'd answer the questions. So again, you've got an option where if you've got the practical element taking place at a different site, then you can add into the questions what that address will be to make sure the IEPA goes to the correct place. So hopefully that just makes one less upload requirement for you. Next slide, please, Emilia. Some of you might have noticed that we now have recent communication was sent out that we've now started our rollout of our feedback Pass Plus. So we're now starting this over the following sort of 4 months, where you will now start to receive feedback for learners that not only fail a section but also pass. So they'll have a breakdown of feedback for the learners to support with your centre development, and obviously the learners' next steps in development too. And for the hospitality sector, the current expected go live date of that feedback will be December/January. I have put a link at the top of the page, which is to our apprenticeship section of the website, and there is a document on there, so that may get updated, it may come sooner, but at the moment that's estimated that you'll start to receive feedback for learners December/January, but obviously as we get a more concrete go live date, we will let you know. This is also the same section where you should find your discussion questions. So those are not necessarily sent out in an email, but I've uploaded into EPA Pro. So if you could obviously just make sure you're familiar with that section, because to make sure that before the professional discussions that you're checking that to make sure you can pass those topics onto the learners to ensure that the professional discussions can take place as expected, because I know we've had a few issues where the learners have not received them, but this is where it should be. So if you go into the learners assessment progress section, at the bottom of that screen you've got the component section that's at the top of this screen. Click on manage, that will bring up a further menu on the right hand side, and towards the bottom of that is the results section. Click on results, that will bring up a further new page, and about 3/4 of the way down the page is a file upload section, and that's where the professional discussion topics will be saved. Next slide, please. And then just a reminder that obviously the support materials are now also in EPA Pro. So rather than having to go into Smart Screen or the website and find the passwords in walled garden, you can now find the support materials in the menu on the left hand side of EPA Pro towards the bottom. The best way that I found to get them is to click on the view option. This will then bring up the screen, which will look blank, but as you look toward the top of the screen, there is an option to click standard. If you click on standard, it will then list all of the standards that you've got approval for, and all the supporting documentation for each of those standards will become together. So rather than having to search for different screens for checklists or the EPA preparation resources, you just got everything in a nice area with everything for each standard together. Next slide, please. And then really just want to obviously add into the slide, obviously the contact numbers for centre support if you need it, but then also for myself and my colleagues in the EPA team. So if we're a centre that's based within the north, happy to obviously drop me an email if you've got any questions or any queries, and equally Maurice in the south and Bex in the Midlands. But really, we'll work together. So if you've got a problem, if one of us is on leave, just email the other person, and we're happy to support. And then obviously you've got the support numbers in the middle of the screen for the support team as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Janice. So have we got any questions for Janice?
We've got one from Dawn. She's got a learner that's failed the questions on Commis Chef. They're struggling to get feedback on the areas that have failed or passed. Can you advise where we can get this, please?
Yeah, so that should be located within EPA Pro, in exactly the same section of the Feedback Plus section. So it should be within the individual component that the learner particularly failed. If you click on the Manage button and click onto results, you should be able to see it. If, John, if you have a look and you can't see it, please drop me an email and I will have a look why that's not showing for you. It may be that the assessor's uploaded it, but it might be saved to as an internal document rather than as an external document. So if you drop me a line, we can get that sorted for you today.
Thanks, Janice. Ian, following on from Dawn, it's my learner, and I checked that, and it's all blank.
Okay.
So
obviously, if you want to drop me an email with obviously let's not discuss learner names on a webinar. So drop me an email, then I can look into that for you, Ian.
And Ian's going to get in touch with you. Thank you.
Brilliant.
No more questions?
I think we'll carry on. Janice is going to stay with us. So again, if anyone's thinking about questions or currently sort of typing in, then we'll have some time for questions at the end. Apologies as well. The slides seem to be jumping around all over the place today. It's not me with a twitchy finger. For some reason, it's just the slides are jumping. So obviously you will receive the presentation, so don't worry about that. You'll have access to all the emails, etc. These are automatically now generated along with your CPD certificates. And for anyone, if you've got colleagues that registered, then they'll also get the slides at exactly the same time. So you should get the slides by tomorrow. But obviously, because they didn't attend, they wouldn't get the CPD certificate. So that's the only difference, essentially. Okay, so thank you for that, Janice. That's really appreciated, and obviously, that's answered a few people's queries as well, which is brilliant. So let's sort of move on now and have a look at some good practice and some reminders from the lead individual endpoint assessors. So this slide specifically about dispensations. We're still having to return dispensation documentation back to you when it's not fully completed. Please don't forget that this document, whether it be the witness testimony or the competency framework, replaces the observation in many cases, or indeed for the chef standard, also the culinary challenge. It is therefore imperative that yourselves and the employers provide sufficient detail within answering the criteria to allow a sound decision to be made. In many cases, apprentices are potentially missing out from gaining distinctions due to the lack of detail being provided. It has also been noted in certain cases that apprentices from the same provider have had competency frameworks copied and pasted from one apprentice to another. This is absolutely not allowed and really does not do your apprentice any justice at all. The documents also need authenticating in all cases by the employers, and the relationship to the apprentice does need stating where asked for. Essentially, what I'm trying to say is all the boxes within each document, whether that be the witness testimony or the competency framework, need to be completed. Finally, please do ensure you upload the dispensation documentation on time, as any delay will hold up the assessment of your apprentice and in turn will hold up the question and answer session. Okay, so this relates across all of the standards. Initial meetings would really benefit from being attended by the employer as well as the training provider alongside the apprentice. We absolutely appreciate that this is time consuming for all parties, but the time then saved in having to amend dates of observations booked would be quite substantial. It really is important currently we have the information as to whether face-to-face or dispensation assessment is required. We're also experiencing an increase in no one attending the scheduled initial meetings at all. So can you please ensure everyone is aware of the correct timings and has the dial-in details? Lastly, please do ask the apprentices to consider where they undertake their professional discussion and question and answer sessions. A quiet place will help them concentrate and increase their chances of gaining a suitable grade. As a room sweep takes place and the endpoint assessor is viewing where the apprentice is, it would also be appreciated if the apprentice was adequately and appropriately dressed. And Janice has already shown you where to find the professional discussion topics on EPA Pro, but we're more than happy, as Janice said, to support you with that. A couple of specific reminders about the Commis Chef and Chef de Partie standards. Firstly, for Commis Chef and the Culinary Challenge, please do ensure that the garnish for the dessert is meeting the standards, and by this I mean is found within the secondary dessert category, e.g. egg-based, fruit-based, biscuits and scones. It would be acceptable for the apprentice to cook a biscuit and use it as a crumb garnish so long as they prepared and cooked the biscuit. If you're unsure about this, please do look at the detail held within the assessment pack in the resources section of EPA Pro that Janice just highlighted. Or obviously you can absolutely send me an email and ask me the question. The recipe logs relate to both Commis Chef and Chef de Partie. We are having lots of problems with them not fulfilling all the criteria. The requirements for the recipe logs has not changed in any way during COVID. No dispensations were put in place. Therefore, the expectation is that they are still recipes with methods, timings, food and health and safety considerations, and that each individual dish does have a photograph of the actual dish produced by the apprentice, whether this was in college or in the workplace. Anything from home is absolutely not allowed. The minimum requirements of prep, cook and finish methods still need to be adhered to and the cross-referencing sheets used. Please do also consider how you're loading and labelling these pieces of evidence so it is clear what each piece of evidence is. This will absolutely support the endpoint assessors. A few reminders specific to team member and hospitality supervisor. Please do ensure that the apprentices have access to and understand the criteria they are trying to cover with their business projects. The word count does need to be adhered to, so please do check that your apprentices are aware of it. Once the actual business project is uploaded to EPA Pro, we will need also adding at the same time a declaration of authenticity for that business project. The gateway declaration does not suffice here. We need a declaration specific to the business project as a piece of evidence in its own right. And lastly, just a thought about the hospitality supervisor standard. It was not designed to cover kitchen job roles, so please do consider the senior chef production standard if this is the job role that your apprentice has. So lastly, mine and Jason's details, as well as the link to the COVID-19 web pages where all updates are added. Also the link to our newsletters, the last of which is just about to be uploaded, and these will continue to be bi-monthly, so the next one will be November. If you aren't registered for email alerts, then the link to take you to do this is also available on this slide. You'll then receive specific hospitality alerts if you select this option. Do also contact us with any specific queries or further support or development needs you may have as a team. We're happy to provide specific team training and further guidance should you feel you need it. Okay, so questions, Jason, do we have any more?
We do. Apologies, I was just typing a couple of responses and I've sent Emma the wrong, well, I've sent the response to Emma, unfortunately to David, so my apologies in advance. I will respond shortly, Emma, to one of your questions. I have got another question though from Emma, Emilia, and this is looking at the assessment plan. There's still a lot of food groups, prep and cooking methods to be covered by the portfolio and professional discussion. She's struggling to understand how all these can be covered using just 20 pieces of evidence and say 12 questions at the PD. Is she not understanding something?
No, not at all. I mean, it's sort of saying, you know, roughly 20 pieces. Then clearly, you know, if you feel that you need to put some more in, that's absolutely fine. But they are sort of, the idea is that you sort of cover as much as you possibly can, you know, with one piece of evidence. So they're basically the people first guidelines that, you know, it is to be around 20 discrete pieces. It's not, you know, you could put more if you wanted to, but we are going to dissuade you from sort of putting lots and lots more, because the portfolio will then support the discussion. So it may well be, you know, if there are certain things that aren't covered by the portfolio in terms of sort of food groups or prep or cook or finish methods, that will be, you know, a question that's then asked. So, you know, the independent endpoint assessor will then ask the apprentice to talk about a dish which covers these prep, cook, finish methods, etc., that they may have cooked.
Cool. And I was typing a response to Emma. She'd asked if photographic evidence was required for every recipe. So Emma, no, it's not required for every piece, but obviously it's really good practice. It really does support the EPA in making a decision going forward. So photographic evidence is just a really good piece to use. Another question. I think this one's, Janice, are you still here? She's gone for a coffee.
Yes, I'm still here. Sorry, I was on mute.
You probably know the answer to this one. The feedback for multiple choice test, I think it is. So sorry, I'll just read it out for you. Does the evolved test, the evolved test, the question and answer, automatically produce feedback for the apprentice when it falls into the new system?
So no, it doesn't. The feedback that you will get if the learner fails is on in EPA Pro will be on the other elements. So any multiple choice feedback that is available would be for the normal Evolve platform and the reporting within that section. So I know Ian mentioned was that actually the feedback that they've actually failed is the knowledge, and that doesn't get pushed through into EPA Pro. So apologies, there was a bit of confusion there.
Thank you for clarifying. Heidi, hi Heidi, she's asking about whether practical demonstrations for Commis chef. One of the requirements from it is that the EPA will choose one. Sorry, it's quite a long-winded one. This one. Demonstration for Commis. How will a learner know what one specific requirement from the 4 that the EPA will choose from is not known until a planning meeting? Is that so? I think what she's asking in a nutshell is when are they going to find out how or which one they will be progressing with, given the new setup?
So I mean, that's all stuff that obviously we need to work through yet, Heidi. You know, we haven't you know, sort of done that. So you know, the EPAs, the lead independent endpoint assessors, have just had access to this. So these are all the meetings that we're currently having to set out timeframes, etc., to be able to sort of put all that in place in the assessment pack. So obviously they will definitely get the time to have that prior to, because they need that to then be able to produce the menu, the recipes, etc., and obviously then carry out the actual observation, and we'll be adhering to all the timeframes that are required by people first. So yeah, that's just something that we are and we will work through.
Cool. Sorry, I've just got a little bit behind on the questions.
That's all right, you've got the tough job today.
Can you repeat the standards to use for a hospitality supervisor equivalent for a chef? Not quite sure what you mean.
So basically there's a standard called Senior Chef Production, which is a level 3 standard. So it would be the progression route from production chef, if you will, at level 2. So that would be the one to sort of use in terms of if, you know, they were in a kitchen environment. We don't currently offer EPA for that. So I appreciate I might be doing us an injustice, but it's quite difficult to cover kitchen-based assessments for hospitality supervisor. I think that was why I was flagging that really. We've had a number of instances that apprentices have been registered on incorrect standards, I would say.
Perfect. And Andy's asking if they're signed up with the college, I presume it's a college, sorry, but not registered with us, which route do they go down?
So if the ILR's been completed and they are registered therefore with the institute, then that would be the date that you need to take it from.
Sorry, I'm just having a quick scroll here. You said earlier that production chef pathway in the team member standard has been removed. Is this been replaced with anything? No, it's not. Obviously, we've already got production chef as a self-alone standard, hence the reason why they're not going to carry on developing within team member. That question was from Alison. I think that's it at the moment. Everything else has sort of been covered. I'll just have another look through.
Yeah, or perhaps if anybody has sort of got a question that we've missed, raise your hand and then we'll we can go back and have a look for it, or I'll take you off mute and you can ask the question.
Yeah, Emily, you've got another couple of questions in there. I think probably easier just to take that offline and arrange a call with myself and Emilia at some point, or we can help you with a bit of clarification with some of these questions that you've got. Andy, is there a time when the old assessments will finish? I have a cohort that are near the end and ready for EPA, the new cohort just getting signed up.
So anyone that's registered on version 1, Andy, which obviously those apprentices are, then that will continue to run until version 1, basically until they're done. So, you know, we will run the 2 versions alongside each other. So as Heidi said, the registration date is the 28th of September for version 2. So anyone pre that will just carry on running it until everybody's done. So, you know, there's no sort of immediate rush or panic at all. Clearly, EPA for version 2 won't be required until at least the end of September, you know, 2022. And that would be for Commis, because it's recommended that for Chef de Partie that they're actually on standard for 18 months before Gateway. So that would be, you know, another 6 months on from there. So please don't panic, anybody. Anyone that's signed up and registered on version 1, absolutely, we will, you know, get them through, as would anybody else. So there's no mass panic at all. It's just that from now on in, you will be working towards EPA for version 2 if you have new apprentices.
Cool, thank you. I think that is it now. Andy's asked if you can convert a learner from version 1 to version 2.
You know, I've been waiting for that question, Andy. That's entirely up to you. Depends how far into the program they are, etc. You would literally have to start again, because standards now, you know, it's not like the old MVQ standards don't transfer from one to another. But, you know, if you sign somebody up last month and then, you know, and you're thinking now, clearly it's a more streamlined standard. So I absolutely understand why you've asked that question. That's entirely down to you internally, the employer, how that's going to work for the apprentice, you know, a discussion to be had with all of you.
Cool. Actually, Dawn's got a hand up. I've just seen that. Sorry, I've missed that. Dawn, do you still want to talk to us? I think we might have. Can we unmute Dawn, Emilia? I don't know if it's a question she's got. She has asked a question. I'm sure we've covered.
Yeah, hang on a moment. I can do that.
See, Emilia's got more control than I have. Well, at least I think you have.
Oh, I'm trying. Apparently not. Have you tried as well?
Yeah, it's not letting me release. That's why I thought it was because you had control.
Clearly not as much control as I wanted.
I'm really. Oh, taking your hand down now, though, I see. Or left. Just.
Sorry, Dawn. I have no idea why it won't unmute you.
Dawn, I can't seem to release it. I think that is all the questions we've got, though, now. I think we've pretty much covered everything. It was the question on recipes above. Oh, have I missed that one?
Obviously.
Dawn.
Emma, I know I'm catching up with you next week, so we can sort of go through everything then. I appreciate that, you know, this is a massive change as well.
We have been, the other thing I can see from Dawn is that we have been told that we don't need to use photos for all and could have a witness testimony. Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And you're absolutely right, Dawn, with the new portfolio, there doesn't have to be annotated photographs. You can have witness testimonies. They're not compulsory at all. All that it's saying, you know, you can use a variety of types of evidence. It's just saying that you can't have any sort of personal or self-reflection from the apprentice, but pretty much anything else that you wanted to put in there, you could. You could also have video content, you know, sort of students sort of producing dishes, although we would be producing guidelines as to how long that's for, etc. Because, you know, in terms of watching that, it would be quite complicated. So no, you know, you can definitely have witness testimonies from employers, but not have that supported by a photograph. You don't need to. You're right.
Cool. I think we've pretty much covered all the questions now, Emilia. You've got our details. If you do have any more questions later on, or we have missed anybody out, not on purpose, I'm sure. So yeah,
absolutely.
I think that's pretty much it.
So you've got our details. So please, if you've got any more questions or concern, didn't want to ask questions today, then do just email me directly, and I'm more than happy to sort of answer questions. And we'll get back to you as soon as we've sort of started to produce any more sort of updates or assessment documentation, things like that. We'll provide you with as much support as we possibly can, obviously moving forward with EPA for these new standards. Absolutely.
And thank you, Janice.
Absolutely. Thanks ever such a lot, Janice, for your input today. It's really helpful to get those updates from EPA Pro, and I'm sure everyone's appreciated it.
No problem at all.
So thank you very much, everyone, for attending. I hope you have a lovely rest of day, and obviously we're almost at that lovely point of the weekend. So best wishes for an absolutely amazing weekend, everyone.